Hey, what's up, everybody? Special edition of the Damian G Show, brought to you by both Anchor.fm as well as Big Gold Belt Media. Check out everyone's kind of content here on Big Gold Belt Media. Big Gold Belt covers wrestling, sports, MMA, among other things, as well as myself covering human interest, sports, as well as psychology. You can find me on Twitter at DamianG347, Big Gold Belt at B Group on Twitter and on Instagram. So last night's show, I did a little snippet about Jon Jones, one of the pound for pound best MMA fighters on the planet, possibly of all time.
He is the pound for pound best.
Possibly of all time. And one of my really good friends, one of my best friends in all of social media and wrestling and in life, rang a text me this morning to have a bit of a rebuttal. So I thought he's the perfect person to bring on to discuss Jon Jones' behavior, as well as behavior of athletes when they have this God complex. And I'll introduce him by saying he is a former MMA moderator, so he does know what he's talking about. He has studied combat sports for years, so he's educated in it. So it's not a Joe Blow talking out of his ass. It's a person that could literally beat your ass if you have any commentary, because that's the going rate and the going line. Avid wrestling fan, photographer extraordinaire, anime guru that I go to, my boy, DEO. I'm just DEO on Twitter. Thank you for joining me.
Good to be here in this Corona vacation.
We live in a very interesting world, my friend.
Corona Cage 2020.
So, okay, before we get into Jon Jones, how are you coping with Corona Gate?
Bro, I'm an introvert, so I like being in my house is my life anyway. Mm-hmm. But like, this is a bit much. This is a bit much. And like, weirdly, I miss work. Like, more so just to get out of the house than anything else. But yeah, like, I'm like knocking out as many video games and TV shows as I can, which real quick, Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard, two of the best shows on TV at the moment.
Okay.
Also Tiger King. Yeah.
Which, not tonight, but we will discuss this show because I just saw the first. I feel like I have to go down this proverbial rabbit hole because it is something.
It's wild. Just wait.
Because I was saying this morning to people, like, Florida man is usually the universal fill-in for things in Florida.
But he's in Oklahoma, so this is like...
Right.
This is some like...
This is north of me, actually, living in Dallas.
Like, if you grew up around rednecks, everybody knows somebody like him. Everybody does.
Oh, it's one of those situations.
Yeah. He's a whole different animal. Like
literally and figuratively. Yes.
Literally and figuratively. Like, but yeah, which actually it kind of does with what we'll be talking about tonight. When you watch it, it will match up pretty in sync with what we're talking about as well. So yeah.
Okay. So for those who missed last night's show, I basically stated that Jon Jones's behavior, for those who don't know, stopped, pulled over, whatever you want to call it, for under a DUI, also having a discharged firearm underneath his seat, his driver's side seat. And this is just another run-in in Jon Jones's career with the law in the premise of self-sabotage and self-destruction outside the octagon. Yeah. Now, I kind of brushed this off as no surprise here. The only reason why we're really making a big deal about this is because it's Jon Jones in his history, where I referenced, hey, Chet from accounting could get pulled over too with, on a DUI and with a loaded gun in his car, and we don't bat an eyelash. Right. Because Jon Jones has a history. That's why this is made a bigger deal. So this morning you text me to say, hey, it's a lot deeper than that. So I want to give you the opportunity to let the audience know, how deeper does this run aside from the fact that we know this isn't an isolated incident. Right. We know he does like this more often than not. How deeper does this go?
So when it comes to mixed martial arts, it's a weird little bubble that people live in. It's the very much that whole tough guy thing. I am, you know, a lot of the king of the world type stuff. You see the Conor McGregor's, the, you know, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Jon Jones, a bunch of these like larger than life like personalities and such. Mm-hmm. So with Jon Jones, like, yeah, he's got a long history of stuff. Crashed a Bentley in 2012 while he was driving under the influence. Crashed. There was a hit and run in 2015 where he hit another car that happened to have a pregnant woman in it, broke her arm, you know, ran from the scene, came back to the scene to like grab his condoms and Funyuns and then dip out. I just had to add that.
Funyuns and dip? Nice.
Yeah. Then like tested positive for benzos and a cocaine metabolite right after he beat Daniel Cormier. Like a bunch of others. Like he's been self-destructive for a very long time. Like he has a whole list. He got suspended from the sport for years, came back, got his belt back, probably going to get suspended again. He has a battery charge in Albuquerque as well, and multiple other DWIs. And like it's so for him, yes, it's an issue. It's an ongoing issue. But what I was saying to you was like, it's not just like it's Joe Blow. Like this is one of the GOATs, one of the greatest of all time. So this would be similar to if a Muhammad Ali went and did something like this, or right now, say a Tyson Fury, which is actually a really good parallel because Tyson Fury has a very storied history of self-destruction, cocaine abuse, blowing up in weight, like, you know, according to him, having unprotected sex with as many people as possible, like really self-destructive behavior. Mm-hmm. And with Jon Jones, it's when you have somebody at the top level doing it, that's when because he's setting a precedent for people that are below him, right? And people are going to be attracted to the sport because, you know, you're always going to have that percentage of people that are going to gravitate towards something for all of the wrong reasons. Right. That's why you tend to have a lot of these bad boys come to MMA because they wouldn't be able to survive or make money otherwise. And just kind of like the culture as a whole within mixed martial arts is a weird one. Conor McGregor last year got in trouble for slapping a elderly man in a bar because they refused to take a shot of his whiskey, which is trash whiskey, by the way. Okay. Then also prior to that, got into trouble for he actually had a media team who has since lost their accreditation to or like their privileges to come to UFC events because they actually snuck him in and allowed him to throw him and multiple others attacked people. He picked up a moving dolly and threw it into the window of a bus. Okay. Glass from when the window shattered went into two different fighters' eyes. They were off the card. They had to settle. He had to settle out of court with them for that. One of the other fighters who was a champion at the time, she ended up getting PTSD from the situation. Like, you have a really like this weird I'm above the law type of thought process and mentality that these folks have. And it wouldn't be so bad if it was just the fighters, but when you have the man at the top of all of this, Dana White, being like he's above the law as well, which he has literally acted like he's above the law before. There was a fight a couple years ago between Jeremy Stevens and somebody else, but Jeremy Stevens got arrested on an assault charge the day before, and he was still like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get him out for the event." Like all the event was going on an hour before the match was supposed to happen. Yeah, we're gonna get him out. I can get him out. 20 minutes in, like 5 minutes before the match was supposed to happen. Oh yeah, we're still working to get. He didn't get out for like until days after the event. But like you have that, and then most recently, you have this match between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson, which is a fight they've booked like 4 times now, and it's gotten canceled because of injuries every single time. So now they booked it again, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're going to do it." But of course, right now we are in a pandemic.
Yes.
And you can't be. We're not trying to hold large groups of people. They had an event recently in Brasilia, and a couple of the fighters were like, "Yeah, we got sick after." They didn't test positive for Corona or COVID-19, but they did get sick. I think one of them probably got dengue fever or something like that. So like you have these issues like that. And now he's saying, "Oh yeah, we're still going to have this event, but we're not going to say where the event is because we don't want basically people to step in and say, you can't do this." So basically they're going to go to a secret location, have this thing. It will essentially be a unregulated fight because you're not going to have commissioners there, which the UFC sell commissions when they go to places that do not have commissions. But this is like now it's like, okay, so now this is an issue. There is a pandemic going on right now, and you're still putting your fighters at risk. You're putting your staff at risk. The commentators have already said we're not going to go because most of them have kids, live with their parents. Their parents live with them, and it's like that's asking a lot of these people to do this. And self-destructive behavior, like he's another one that's done that. Like the first big one that I remember was like there was a female reporter that said something he didn't like, and he went on YouTube, posted a video on YouTube calling her all kinds of words, like dumb bitch, a cunt, all types of like things that you should not say to a reporter that works at a large platform. And he did this stuff. So like it was, yeah. So like it's a whole, it speaks to the culture of MMA where it's like, yeah, it's not just that it's not a big deal. It is a big deal when you have the context of the full situations. And like we talked about with Greg Hardy and things like that too. Mm-hmm. Like Greg Hardy has a long storied history of domestic violence.
Domestic violence and anger issues.
Right. And like he wouldn't be able to go anywhere else to get work, right? The NFL put up with him for as long as they did because, performances talk. But once he was out, he couldn't get work anywhere else.
Well, he tried MMA briefly.
No, he still is in MMA, right?
Okay.
So, and like Dana White was like, "Oh yeah, no, everybody deserves a second chance." It's like, no, some people don't deserve a second chance. Sorry, you just don't. Like when you've done something like that, you've shown no real remorse. When people ask you about it, you don't want to talk about it. It's just oh yeah, no, I've moved past it. Pretty sure your ex significant other hasn't been able to move past that. Like we saw the pictures of what you did. This isn't just like something that you just sweep under the rug. This is bad.
So at what point, I guess my question would be, at what point will talent not outweigh behavior? Because it seems that talent outweighs behavior now. And I've talked about this in sports constantly. Nick Hardy's one that comes to mind. And then, we have like the Ray Lewis's, allegedly, of the world, those who have been brought to trial for atrocious crimes and either have been acquitted, OJ, have been acquitted, but convicted in the court of public opinion and life, almost like living life. At what point will Jon Jones's behavior, if ever, catch up to him?
If you murder somebody.
Really?
Yeah. If he murders someone or if he commits, so there are some things that you can't wash away. If you don't go to jail for it, it'll follow you forever. OJ, like,
of course,
that will follow him and his family forever. But murder, pedophilia, and rape, these are things as now. Prior years back, yeah, you could get away with stuff, but post Me Too, that's something that you can't really get come back from. But it also depends on where you are, because in mixed martial arts, there have been people that have raped folks, and we know that they've raped folks. They've raped other fighters, and it still gets swept under the rug. So yeah.
What are some examples of that?
I'd have to see.
And for those just tuning in, I'm interviewing my friend, MMA moderator or former MMA moderator, DEO Dio. Find him on social media at I'm Just DEO. Find me on Twitter at Damian G 347 and Damian G 347 on Instagram as well. We're here talking about Jon Jones's kind of salty and sordid history,
right?
Basically toward other humans and how he's self-destructing. So I just want to catch everybody up to this point.
Right.
So you were telling me about examples potentially of fighters raping other fighters?
Yeah, or rather, so it was fighters. Like I remember there was one woman, Jessica Rose Clark. I had the exact details. I remember there was like domestic abuse. The guy was a fighter, was also like a barber or a tattoo artist or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And he ended up like fleeing the country after like
that's not War Machine, is it? That's a different story.
Was what?
War Machine.
No. War Machine's a whole other thing. But War Machine is like another one of self-destructive behavior, right? Like no two ways about that. Or John Copenhaver. I don't want to call him War Machine. I don't want to give him what he wants. Like
the moniker.
He wants to be called War Machine. Dude, your name is John Copenhaver.
Didn't he legally change his name?
He legally changed his name. I'm not gonna fucking call him that. Like, yeah.
And isn't that why WWE didn't call the Viking Raiders War Machine?
No, they didn't call them War Machine.
I thought that was the reason, because
because the Viking Raiders. So it was Viking Raiders, because what were they called? They were War Machine, but what were they called in then they were the Viking Raiders in NXT, right?
Yes.
Okay. So
the Viking Experience and then back to the Viking Raiders, right?
Right. So Viking Experience, I know they couldn't use Viking Experience because of there was some place that actually had that name already. The Viking Experience, right? But I'm pretty sure War Machine probably had more to do with Marvel Comics than anything else.
Which is probably, for the most part, you and I connect more to War Machine, the character in Marvel.
Right, yeah.
Shout out to Don Cheadle, who made that role his own, especially in the Avengers sagas, which was hilarious.
Yes, fantastic.
Yeah, I would gather to say, if you go back and watch or rewatch Avengers Endgame and even Avengers 2 or Age of Ultron,
don't watch Age of Ultron. Age of Ultron's fast.
No, but I'm saying for his part, like his little snippet when he's telling that joke.
Yeah.
When they're all getting drunk. Like Don Cheadle's performance, bonk Terrence Howard. Bonk that.
We don't know. We don't talk about him.
We don't talk about him like he didn't exist. But Don Cheadle in Endgame and Infinity War were pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So overall, okay. War Machine is one, example. The fighter,
really bad
formerly known as War Machine. Yes.
Yeah. A really bad example. For those of you that don't know what he did,
he beat the crap out of his former girlfriend.
Yes, his girlfriend, Christy Mack, former adult film star.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she's former or if she still is.
Former, I believe.
I think it's former. Yeah, because after that, she needed she already had plastic surgery due to her a lot of work, but like broke teeth out, broke ribs, fractured bones in the face.
Yeah,
it was very bad. And due to what she did for a living, you had a lot of fans in the MMA community that were saying that she deserved it.
What?
Right. That was kind of like the beginning of when I was like, I don't need to be in this space anymore, because a vast majority of the people in this fandom are trash human beings. But yeah. So self-destructive behavior, it's kind of like one of those things when it comes to MMA. It's I don't want to say it's par for the course, but it's very, very, very common, and it's very prevalent. Way more prevalent than it should be.
So I guess my
real quick, you kind of have to have self-destructive behavior to fist fight for a living. Same thing with professional wrestling.
Okay, see, I was trying to take the psychological aspect out of it, but yes, I agree with you. In order to willingly want to stand in the middle of a ring, in the middle of an octagon or ring, same with boxing, and literally want to throw hands to hurt somebody, there's got to be a special kind of something mentally going on, some sort of mental deconstruction where I want to hurt this person for money.
Right.
You know, and growing up knowing, and this is what's going to make me money.
Right, yeah.
So at what point and I know you've told me this, I want you to tell the audience this, at what point is Jon Jones going to be too hot to touch?
It would have to be one of those extreme things, because
like you said, pedophilia, things like that.
Pedophilia, murder, or like rape, where there's evidence. Because that's one of the things about domestic violence and rape is there has to be tangible evidence, usually video, blood on clothing, things of that nature. You have to have something that shows definitively that something happened, because when it comes to rape, like, let's just be honest, the courts are set up to protect men. So, you know, that's one of those things. But he would have to do something so heinous that he would be nuclear to touch. Like he would have to. And I hate to say it, but the way that he continues doing this, it's going to take something very tragic to happen for him to stop. Because like if you the backstory with Jon Jones, both of his brothers are actually in the NFL.
Okay.
You know, comes from a devout Catholic, or not Catholic, but a devout Christian family, like son of a preacher, all that, right? Like it's he's got some pretty serious, right?
Okay.
So if you know people, especially like if you know people that grew up with like pastors or preachers or anybody that's like deep into the church, or actually within the organization of the church, they tend to rebel like this. His brothers have had issues as well. I believe, if I remember correctly, one of them actually had an issue with K2 a couple years ago.
Oh.
Let me double check. Yeah, so his brothers Arthur and Chandler Jones. I want to say
Chandler Jones. I know who that is from the NFL, right?
But yeah, if I remember correctly, like one of them had an issue with a synthetic drug a while back.
So while you're looking, I want to remind people about, there was someone when we were younger who.
And yes, it was K2. Sorry, it was Chandler Jones, K2, synthetic marijuana.
Synthetic marijuana, right? Yeah. So I want to remind people, revisionist history. I'm old enough, and you're old enough to remember Mike Tyson, before the rape and before the prison sentence.
Yep.
And we talked about before on previous shows about how the downfall of Mike Tyson was not only because he was a boxer, it was because he wasn't mentally equipped to handle everything that he was going through and processing, and then getting hit in the face for a living is another thing.
Yeah.
And then I've often thought, even before, Mike made that one comeback, I knew he wasn't going to come back in one piece after prison.
No.
I knew he wasn't going to be the same guy, because that ferociousness was gone.
Yeah.
Like whatever Mike had in terms of anger and vitriol was gone after the prison sentence.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to say, the prison sentence possibly saved Mike Tyson's life, but
I think it did, honestly.
But obviously his second career as Mike Tyson, the person, the human, the interesting human, for me, is much more valuable than the former heavyweight champion of the world. And I feel as if, boxing tried to exploit him because of the name. And obviously he thought I'd make a couple of $1 million and get back, because he owed money. So Jon Jones, I feel, even if he did a prison sentence,
So like the thing
Dana would be waiting.
The two of them are two. I don't want to. I wouldn't put those two in the same.
I'm not putting them on the same path.
Right.
I'm saying more from my old memory of something similar.
Something similar. Yeah. Because like I know because with Mike Tyson, just so people know, like with Mike Tyson, I know a lot of people do not like him, and he did a lot of heinous things, very bad things. But he was a product of his environment and how he grew up. Like if you knew the story of how he grew up, I'm not excusing his behavior, but it makes sense why he ended up the way that he was. And he was exploited by a lot of people. He was exploited by, of course, people, Custom Auto, all of those, even though they were boxing greats. And like that was a tick. He was their gravy train. Like that was, you now have like this like boxing phenom, a prodigy, if you will, that, you could hit yourself to, but you have a broken human being. Right. Yeah. And he needed therapy in the worst way possible. But then once you got Don King into the picture and now you have him, he's in this space with all of these, beautiful women and this is that and the other. And then Robin Givens comes into the picture. And like, I'll take flack for this, but her and her mom exploited Mike Tyson as well. So like it was so many things that went wrong for Mike Tyson that were kind of outside of his
wheelhouse,
outside of him being able to control these things. With Jon Jones, he can control these things. Like Jon Jones brags at press conferences about being high on cocaine when he beat people. Like this is the level of delusion that and complete being completely out of touch with reality that Jon Jones has. And he's been Jon Jones, this larger than life character, for when did he win his title? He won his first.
Since I've known about him, he's been this larger than life character.
He won light heavyweight championship in 2011. So for the past 9 years, he has been Jon Jones, the top of the game, because he's undefeated. He has one loss on his record, but that's a DQ, but technicality. But it was like he has been at least a decade now. He has been this phenom within mixed martial arts. So he's been able to skate so many times on this stuff that it's going to take something drastic for him to change his ways. Like it would have to be something tragic, honestly, because even if it's something drastic where he has to go to jail, I'm pretty sure he'd end up doing the same thing over again. Like it would have to be.
It wouldn't change him at all.
It wouldn't change him at all. He would have to lose something that is dear to him in a tragic fashion for him to change. And even then, I'm even kind of iffy if he would even change then.
Okay.
And, like bringing, mixed martial arts into it, CTE, things of that nature. Like it.
Which we're going to get to.
Yeah, it physically changes your brain. So like when you are fighting for a living, even though he doesn't get tagged up a lot, the last I'd say 4 or 5 matches have been way more contentious than than his older ones were. So like it's starting to build up to whereas like I don't want this to end tragically like so many other people that had CTE have.
Well, I've talked about this in previous shows. You can find them on YouTube and Anchor. Basically saying when an athlete holds on too long, it looks pretty sad.
Yeah.
And I know in boxing, mixed martial arts, Chuck Liddell was one that actually comes to mind when I say held on too long,
Yep.
and then you get put on your backside, embarrassed, essentially. So from how we're describing Jon Jones, you're saying, hey, he's only going to respond if he loses something dear to him that's going to matter to him.
Right.
His career, his titles, are those?
No, because he can lose the title, he could get the title back. Like
his ability to fight.
Like because if he lost his ability to fight, he would still find other ways to F up. When I say something tragic, I'm talking losing a family member, losing them due to his own actions. That it would have to be something tragic of that nature would have to happen, because if he gets suspended for 4 or 5 years, he can come back and win the title again. That's how good Jon Jones is in the ring, or within the octagon, whatever, whatever. But like something like severe would have to happen for him to wake up, because seeing how he has reacted to things, and over the years he's just become more and more like, oh yeah, this is just who I am. It's like, ooh.
Oh, you see, that's when you lose me. Yeah,
right. That's when it's like, this is gonna be bad.
And we've talked about this about other people where they dig their heels in and they double down on problematic behavior, and I guess from what you're saying, that this is it. Like, he's going to do this. There's almost no chance he changes unless something drastic happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to switch gears really quick here on the Damian G Show, Anchor.fm, and Big Gold Belt Media. We're wrestling fans. For those who don't know, Dio and I used to do a show called Podcast Champs, and we talked about wrestling in terms of just kind of big picture mixed with just problematic behavior that we're calling out or we would point out. So this week, we had the second part of the Dark Side of the Ring with Chris Benoit on Vice. And it was a two-parter. They're both about 45 minutes. You can find them on Vice's website or on YouTube. Mm-hmm. The first part is something I want to hark on at first is there was a lot dedicated to his friendship with Eddie Guerrero. Mm-hmm. And Eddie Guerrero's death in particular as a major turning point and traumatic event that sent him on the way pretty much down the free fall to being mentally destroyed. And thusly, we mix in the CTE, obviously we talk about that, but the mental destruction, the self-destruction of Chris Benoit. I want you to kind of share your feeling on watching part one specifically, because you and I are pretty big Eddie Guerrero fans. We've appreciated his work and he himself trials and tribulations that he had come back from. Mm-hmm. So especially when his nephew Chavo Guerrero was talking about his death, and how were you feeling? How were you kind of digesting all that? Because I was a mess. So
that was, I guess that was the first time that a lot of folks heard that he passed away in Chavo's arms, which is,
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't
know that, and I can't imagine somebody dying in my arms. I have been places when people have passed away, and so like some people don't believe this thing, but the whole thing of being an empath, when that happens, you feel it, and it doesn't wash away. It doesn't go away. It takes weeks, sometimes a month or two, for that energy to leave your system. And like that for me, I was just that broke me. Like I like seeing a grown man break down the way Chavo did, like, because none of us knew this before. Like, none of us knew any of these things prior. Like, we knew that they were close, but we didn't know how close those were. Like, the whole idea of like soulmates and things of that nature, like those two were soulmates. And because like I constantly have to tell people, like, soulmates aren't just romantic,
right?
Yeah, like sometimes you meet people where it's just like, that's like we are important to each other on a different level. Mm-hmm. And with those two, that absolutely was the case. And I believe in my heart of hearts that Eddie was the thing that was keeping him. That was the connection that was keeping him, raveled all those years. Because like that was what was keeping him there. Like Eddie was his rock. Of course, his wife, his kids, and all that stuff. But like Eddie honestly might have been like the love of his life, to be honest. And when you lose something like that, especially when you have somebody that is so passionate about things in life like Chris Benoit was, when you lose something like that, and like just hearing about how like, after Eddie passed away, he went, they were trying to figure out where he was. They go up to the room and he was on Eddie's side of the bed sobbing. Like at the funeral, Chris Jericho said he cried through his jacket, shirt, undershirt. Like I've cried like that before when somebody died. And it takes a lot. There has to be a very special connection for someone to let out that kind of emotion. Like it was a lot. Like that was so much. And like knowing, and the thing with Chris Benoit, what made it so bad was the fact that he knew that his style of wrestling was going to lead to something bad, because everybody that used it before him ended up bad.
And they referenced that on the show where Harley Race was the innovator of the diving headbutt.
And he said, stop doing it. It ruins your head, and it ruins your spine.
Dynamite Kid, same thing.
Dynamite Kid, well known for domestic abuse, pulled a shotgun on his ex, like a bunch of bad stuff. And this was all, it's all related to CTE. When it comes like rage and, acts of violence are linked to CTE. And it's hard to explain it to people if they've never known somebody that has it or met somebody that has it. And I've gotten to see people firsthand. So like the NFL, I won't say who the people are, but the NFL lawsuits for concussions.
Yeah.
I videotaped a few of those depositions.
Okay.
And when they show videos of how people spoke before, and then the shell of a person is sitting in front of you, it's sobering. Like it makes it very hard to enjoy pro wrestling, boxing, MMA, football, rugby, anything that's full contact. It makes it very hard to enjoy these as a sport or as a pastime, because these people are actively destroying their lives for our entertainment. And like when I tell you like how bad it is, so I go to the guy's house that the deposition's at, pull up, go set up all the stuff. His wife is, you could tell she's just so tired of having to deal with this, because she came to the door Xanaxed out of her mind. Like she was like a walking ghost. I set my stuff up. The attorney set up. His live-in nurse comes, and I was like, oh yeah, I have to go get him. I was like, you have to go get him. I look at this picture of this dude, 6'4", about 275-pound Adonis, blonde hair, blue-eyed, just looked like what you would expect, like somebody that was a famous football player from bygone times to look like, right?
Okay.
And then this person, the shell of a person, comes walking down. Body, you can tell, has been beat to hell. Nurse brings him around to everyone. He greets everybody. He gets to me and I shake his hand. And I will never forget this. His pupil went from being the size of a dot and then it just blew out. And I'm sitting there like, what
just happened?
Because I saw it and I'm like, what the hell just happened? Because the energy changed as well. And then she was like, oh, it's okay. Like, essentially, his brain resets. He forgets how to walk. He forgets how to talk. He forgets who he is. And these happen in different intervals all day long. And like, that was to see during the deposition. And it's not like you can't fake stuff like that. You can't fake things of that nature. So like when he's talking about stuff and then mid-sentence, brain resets. And it was just like, what? This is crazy. Like I've never seen anything like this before in my life. And it's terrifying. It is honestly terrifying to see how that happens. And then this was before they didn't know any better, right? But and even when Chris Benoit was coming up, they didn't know what CTE was, right?
No one knew, right?
Because the old term for this was called being punch drunk, or dementia pugilistica was the term that they used for it prior to this. And specifically they used that for boxers, and everybody just kind of thought that was only a thing that boxers got. No, anytime anybody that continuously gets concussions, and a concussion is anytime that your brain, so you have your brain, you have the fluid that's on the inside and the other tissue and stuff that holds it in place. Anytime your brain knocks up against your skull, that's a concussion.
That's a concussion, right?
Every single time. Even if it's the light stuff, you roll out of bed and you hit your head on the ground, that's a concussion. Like it may be a very low grade concussion, but it's still a concussion.
Right. And
when you are continuously having that, you get these buildups of, it's like almost like a calcium type thing.
Yeah, they call it calcified.
Yeah, it gets calcified, and essentially your brain starts to rot from within.
Yeah, that's what they said.
So when this happens, like imagine that, like portions of your brain that are important to things. Like the brain's a very special thing. It can't regrow itself, but it will reroute things and give different parts of the brain the job that other parts once had. But when it's rotting, your brain's not able to make those new connections again and redistribute. So you have that. Then you have somebody that's already like super zealous about stuff, like the fact that he would punish himself if he thought that he messed up in the ring. That's crazy. To do 500 squats, like 500 Hindu squats is insane. Like, I don't even think I could do 50 of those before.
I don't like doing regular squats. So imagine doing Hindu squats.
Right. Like that's insanity. 500 of them. And
because he thought he messed up.
Because he thought he messed up. Like that's when you have that type of zealousness coupled with CTE, coupled with tragedy that probably did not go to a therapist for.
Well, they even talk about that during the show where they introduced Chris Nowinski in episode 2 or part 2, and how shortly before Benoit's murder-suicide, he sits down next to Chris Nowinski and says, hey, so how many concussions have you had? And they kind of bond over the amount of concussions. And Chris was supposed to do research regarding CTE because according to Chris Nowinski, Chris knew something was wrong.
Right.
Aside from Eddie's death, he knew something was wrong. So for a man to, and let me just preface for the audience, I don't condone the actions. He is a murderer, killed his wife and his child, put a blight on his son that's alive, and took a wife and mother away from her family. Right. Not condoning it. But for a man to realize, and we talked about Jon Jones in his power, realizing he can stop this, try. I'm not going to say he tried to stop this, but according to the documentary, there was at least an acknowledgement of this ain't right. I mean, like this ain't good.
Right. And like when they're talking about his journal, what he was writing in the journal.
Right to Eddie, essentially.
Yeah. Like that is the diary of a madman. Like that is, you can actively, as they were telling the story, you can actively chart how he was gone. He was just completely out of it. And I put a good amount of blame on Vince McMahon for a lot of this as well, because you have to have the well-being of your people at the forefront. And like the fact that like unguarded chair shots were so prevalent in the 80s and 90s, specifically the 90s and the Attitude Era. Like, and I know people, they romanticize the Attitude Era. It is legitimately one of the worst pro wrestling eras of the last 50 years. It's not good. You just had very memorable moments. Right. And it had that flash of violence. Sex and violence was what it was. Sex and violence was what sold the Attitude Era. And like when you see these people getting hit in the head, and specifically that shot where JBL hit Eddie Guerrero in the head, and it just opened up a major artery, and it's just, had that been a fight in boxing or mixed martial arts, they would have stopped the fight immediately.
Right.
It would not have gone on, because that's a life-threatening injury. But the fact that they did it in the WWE tells you a lot about how important these people's health was, right? And like, it is the fact that this was what they were pushing for. Like, that's the people at the top are responsible for that. Like, just like when they took away the pile driver after, it's like, oh yeah, people really getting injured by this. Same thing with unguarded chair shots. Once it became a thing where it's like, oh yeah, we can get, once they were starting to get sued over things, that's when they changed.
Right.
Once it became a monetary issue for them and a public issue for them, that's when they changed.
I think that's where you hit the nail on the head. When it becomes a public issue for a corporation, now we're going to change it, because we can't look bad in the public. Look, if I'm gonna talk about the Netflix Daredevil series and Wilson Fisk.
Yeah.
I've learned anything about corporate mobsters. Like, on the surface, this man is a philanthropist and he cares about the public image. Behind closed doors,
big trash.
He don't care. Vince is trash behind closed doors. So I want we got somebody in the chat. Eugene Evans, shout out to Eugene. Wade Ilson, I believe that's who's in the chat right now. Regal, when they were doing the Chris Benoit tribute show, you can tell, and they brought this up, you could tell by his cadence that he knew something was afoot.
Yep.
And he was very careful with how he worded
himself.
His verbal eulogy almost.
Yeah. I remember even as a kid, because that happened in what year was that? Chris Benoit died 2007. So I would have, so that was I'd been like in my early 20s, basically, right? Like, even at my younger age and watching that, I knew something was wrong. Like, I knew when Regal got on, I was like, this is for everyone to be just heaping praise, and for Regal to cut character. Wasn't being his usual self, was like deadpan. I was like, okay, something's off. I didn't know what it was. And of course, the following day when we find out what happened, and like the fact that this was, we now know that like there were issues, because we didn't know any of the real issues, right? Like, even when Nancy's sister was on Talk Is Jericho, they didn't give all the details. We got some of this stuff. And now it's just like, Jesus Christ. There were failures from so many people that weren't the family's fault. Like, so many people knew things. And this kind of goes to the general public's treatment of domestic abuse and things of that nature when it comes to women, had people stepped in,
Well, they talked about, who was it? Was it Johnny Grunge or Rocco? One of the Public Enemy? Yeah, Johnny Grunge was, which I did not know this either, which was a little added wrinkle. How Johnny Grunge was the "I'll go get Chris" guy when Chris was acting the fool.
I mean, I grew up in Marietta, Georgia, so like I saw all these people all the time, and
like that one, I got him, and then okay,
yeah, like you got to see. I used to see Lex Luger all the time. Like I would see Sting every now and then, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes all the time, because that boy loved Cody, and he made sure he was always there for Cody's practices and things of that nature and all that good stuff. So, but yeah, like there were failures from so many different people that knew the situation, where it was just like, okay, this is bad. This is very bad.
So me watching the show, and for those tuning in, you're listening to the Damian G Show, Anchor.fm, Big Gold Belt Media, YouTube, as well as on Instagram and Twitter. I'm getting choked up thinking about the fact that David, his son, he's, in my opinion, I do have background in psychology as a therapist and a psychologist, but just eye test. He is not well. Visibly not well. Not, of course, I wouldn't be well either.
Yeah.
But I worry that he may down the road, hopefully this was cathartic for him, but something may happen to him mentally because of lack of processing, people continuously reminding him of who his father was, and he still in the documentary had hero worship for his father, despite the CTE. That was really awkward. Despite the CTE, despite the murder of someone who he said, hey, we didn't use the term step. Like, that was my brother. And Nancy, even though she was my stepmom, like Nancy was family.
Right.
Still having a hero complex regarding his dad.
That was so, and that's been my issue with him for years. For years. It's been so hard to feel bad for him. Right. Because I know his story and it's bad. But the fact that he is still so blindly attached to this, it's one of the toughest things, of the whole documentary, because he is it's not like a kind of sort of worship. He still that's like his hero, and it's like he killed your brother, someone that you are blood related to, then killed himself after he killed your brother and your mom, basically.
Right. Your stepmom, whatever.
Your stepmom. That is unfathomable for most people. Right. And for him to just be so blind, there were times during the documentary where I was like, fuck you. Because it was sickening to hear it, because it's we know what happened. And looking at him, you can, like you said, he's not right. Sunken in eyes, you can see he's not eating properly. You can see just the little tics and things that he has. There's a lot going on there with him. And like Eugene said in the chat, he has on rose-colored glasses, because I think with some people you have to, in order to get past certain traumas, if you're not doing it the right way. Right. Because therapy is a scary thing. Scary thing to deal with. To start to unpack things that hurt you emotionally, that hurts more than physical. So with him, it's just like he needs to like get like, if he's not already in therapy, he needs to get better therapy, because that was just like, to me, that was just the hardest thing to watch, and all that, knowing what happened, knowing all of this, like, and still just being like, oh yeah, that's my hero. And I'm just like, bro, no.
Like, no. He may have been at one point,
right,
but the finished product.
Yeah, that was not the same person. Like that was not the same person that you knew. And like, it's one of the things that I constantly have an issue with when it comes to people being saying like, oh yeah, well, you just have to separate what he did in the ring and what he did outside of it. It's like, you can't. You literally, in this situation specifically, you cannot separate what he did in the ring with what he did outside of the ring, because what he did in the ring was attached to what happened outside of the ring. Had he not had that exact same style that he had in the ring, he wouldn't have had the severe CTE, which likely he would not have had the same type of incidents happen outside of the ring. You cannot separate the two. You can't.
You can't. One led to the other.
One led to the other. Like, you can't. It would be like, so there's a fighter in mixed martial arts, Alexander Emelianenko. He's the brother of one of the all-time greats, Fedor.
He's Fedor's brother. Mm-hmm.
Right. He's got one of the hepatitis. I forgot exactly which one it was. And he caught it outside of the ring, possibly inside the ring. We don't know. But he continues to fight. And then he continues. But so, like, you can't separate what you do in the ring and what you do here when you have something that affects both things. You can't. You can't. CTE affects both things. CTE is caused by what he did in the ring, which then led to what he did outside of it. You can't separate the two. It's not possible. Right? Like, it would be one thing, like with Xavier Woods. What he does in the ring and what he does on up, up, down, down, two completely different things. Mm-hmm. That's something you can separate, right? Because what he does in the ring doesn't have anything to do with the video games that he plays.
Same thing with Oscar.
Same thing with things. Two very different things. But when you have a disease that is literally caused by what you do at work in the ring and it affects your life, you can't separate the two. It's not possible.
And that's a good point brought up by Eugene. And I don't remember them talking about this, but he's saying that David embraced all the good about his father, but dumped the bad to the side. Yeah. I don't know if he even copped to his dad's behavior during it. I don't remember.
No, he didn't
cop to it, but all he kept saying was that wasn't my father. That wasn't him. Right. And traumatically, when you compartmentalize and you put it like in Bad Boys, you put it in that little box and you try to throw it in the ocean, it's gonna float back up.
Yeah.
And I'm scared for this young man that it's gonna come out and one person's gonna potentially push him too far button-wise about his dad.
Right.
And he himself may snap.
Right. Yeah, no. And that's the thing. So tragedy changes you at a molecular level.
Yes.
And this is a thing that we have proof of this now. Tragedy is passed on in your DNA. Like, it is passed on from one generation to another generation. This is a scientific thing. There are now studies of this where it shows, tragic, like when you have hardship and when you have tragedy, it absolutely changes how people adapt and grow to things. And with him, that is an extreme amount of tragedy that happened. Yeah. And with the whole thing, because I remember it was a couple years ago, like he wanted to become a pro wrestler. And it was like, no, don't do that. And not just that, but he wanted to wrestle as Chris Benoit's son. No, we know you are. If you do, come up with another name, right? It's not like with Brian Pillman Jr., where this was a chronic issue that he had that his father also had. And he won, but the son of the man that passed away, he didn't die of a tragic incident where he was, a murder-suicide, right? You can bring up that name again. You are not persona non grata. Chris Benoit you don't touch that.
He's scrubbed from existence.
And rightfully so. Like, on one hand, with how the WWE never reached out to them, on one hand, I actually understand why they didn't reach out to them. I absolutely understand why they didn't reach out to him. Like, I would find it. What are they supposed to do? What could they do other than say, I'm sorry, this is, sucks, but like, what could they do? Like, there was very rarely am I going to defend the WWE on anything, but in that situation, what could they do?
The only thing they could have done, like you said, is thoughts and prayers and cut him a check.
Like, what is that going to really do? Like, all of that stuff, it's so bad when you have situations like this, because it's what can you do? Like, now with Nancy's, sister, sure, that's a different story. They should have handled things better. I do feel bad for JR because they were like, this is a work, but it's like JR knew her as well before.
JR knew Nancy and Chris.
Like, that's a tough spot for JR. Like, I understand where she's coming from and her rage, but like, JR knew them before he was in the WWE. That was a bit, that one felt, I don't want to say selfish, but I understand where both sides are coming from. But still, like, I felt for JR because it's like, what, he was kind of innocent in
that moment. Yeah, he was just a company. What's the phrase? He was a company representative.
Right. To her, he was a company rep, but he was also somebody that was close to these people. So it was like, fuck.
And one thing also that came up, and I've seen some people talk about this that he was a glory hog in all this because he's kind of the linchpin. Chris Jericho, being what seems to be the peacemaker, the mediator after all this,
right,
and bring together, the families together. And ironically enough, they're watching AEW together in the footage, which I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
But what do you? Okay, I want to end it on a couple of points.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, what are your thoughts? We've talked about Eddie dying. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts empathetically with Chavo in that moment? That's one. Number two, where do you view Jericho's role in pulling this together? And three, what are your feelings after seeing it play out over 2 episodes regarding the whole situation?
So it's a tough one because Jericho is always working something. He is a showman by nature. That's just who he is to be a showman. So like, I don't think there's malice or anything of that nature or glory seeking or anything of that nature with the intent of gaining monetarily off of this. Right. But he was absolutely one of the people that was like, had that Talk is Jericho episode not happened years ago, this documentary wouldn't have happened.
Agreed.
So he is important to have on that. And he knew both of them intimately, wrestling in Japan, wrestling in Mexico, wrestling in WCW and WWE and ECW. He knew these people intimately in a way that most other people aren't going to. He was one of the first people that came over from WCW to WWE or WWF at the time. He worked with Chris and Eddie probably. So Eddie, it would have been Chris, Eddie, Jericho, and Dean Malenko.
Mm-hmm. Their
matches were cycled all the time in WCW.
And Rey Mysterio.
But like that was that core group. They knew each other. So while I understand, yes, Jericho does come off kind of crappy at other times for being always working. Mm-hmm. But in this, he is important to it. He is close to both all of the parties in a way that nobody else in the wrestling world is.
Okay.
So like I think a lot of times people kind of get caught up in the moment with things and don't actually look at the facts of situations. And this is absolutely one of those ones because it's hard to separate the facts and being enraged about all of this because it is a lot to take in. So, it's I don't really see it as I didn't view it as negative. There was a couple points where I was like, all right, but then again, this is just who Jericho is. He is the consummate showman. He's always going to have, that's just how he speaks. That's just how he is. It's not like a put on thing. You just have some folks that just talk like that. And
it always seems like he's holding court.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's just the type of person that he always is. He is like, when he's over in New Japan, it's the same thing. Like he is the character. The character is him. Like Chris Jericho, Fozzy, Chris Jericho, the person as well, are all the same. They are one in the same existence. So, and I don't think he can separate those. I'm pretty sure when he's at home, that's who he is as well.
God, I hope he's able to turn off at some point.
Yeah.
So, what overall, after watching both parts, what are your final thoughts on it?
Final thoughts on it. There need to be better, even now, they still need to figure out better safety protocols. They need to figure out the wellness program better as well, because what they have now is trash. And it needs to be expanded to not just be for PEDs, recreational drugs, but it also needs to be for sickness as well, as we saw with the Miz showing up to work sick. When you have somebody that's immunocompromised that just came back from recovering from leukemia, no. But like, it's one of those sobering things where every now and then in sports something happens that's just so tragic that it's like it makes you completely rethink things. And when this happened, it did change a lot of things in the industry. But as time goes on, a lot of those things have kind of swept under the rug because people forgot what happened. Like, and then I don't want to yuck somebody else's yum, but like death matches, the matches on like the independent circuit where people are doing like super crazy things and stuff like that. That are
bomb matches and things like that.
Yeah, bomb matches. Like there was the one clip sometime last year of the woman that was it was the Outsider's Edge, got tossed out of the ring, and it was a group of people that caught her, but had they not caught her, she'd have been dead. Like she would have landed on her head. It would have been broken. That's it.
It goes back to when we watched ECW when they threw Spike Dudley around like he was, a plaything.
Yeah, Spike Dudley, Mike Awesome versus Masato Tanaka. Super Crazy versus Tajiri. I'll watch those. I used to watch those matches religiously.
Same.
If I go and watch them now, I cringe every single side because now I know better. I didn't know any better back then. I just thought it was all fake. Now I know better.
Now we know better that this is severe.
This is very severe, yeah. Like
Mankind, Mick Foley, for instance.
Oh yeah.
All his headshots.
Like the fact that he's still able to speak is a miracle.
Speak and walk.
Speak and walk. It's an absolute miracle. Because that man, I don't even what?
He should not be here with us.
He should not be here with us right now at all. And I think due to what has happened with a lot of performers that had these strong style, Shibata specifically, Takayama as well. What was the other pro wrestler that passed away in the 2000s?
The Shibata one kind of gets me because he's one of the guys that brought me back into wrestling to watching it after a long hiatus, especially on the independent scene or Ring of Honor or New Japan. And him almost dying because of brain trauma. Goodness Lord.
Yeah. Masala.
Oh yeah, Masala. Mm-hmm.
Masala. One other was
oh, and Eugene, to answer your question in the chat, apparently Miz showed up ill to SmackDown and had to be sent home.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Dana Brooke, had to be sent home because she was sick as well.
Yeah.
So don't be surprised if the WrestleMania card we thought we were going to get may not happen.
Cancel it. They should have just canceled. They should have canceled WrestleMania. I understand why they're doing it, but they should have. Like, you should have just canceled this. This is putting people's lives.
But this goes to show what we were talking about.
Yeah, Hayabusa is the other person that I'm thinking of, who was like one of the all-time great high flyer deathmatch people, and one of the best costumes of all time as well. But which people probably remember them from ECW. It was the match. It was Sabu and RVD versus
against Hayabusa and Hakushi, formerly known as Hakushi.
I
saw that match recently. I saw it about maybe 2 weeks ago.
It's a classic. It's a classic.
Mm-hmm.
But since we've seen so many of these people pass away or get injured, because just within it was like a 3 or 4, no, it was like a 2 year. Oh no, I think it might have been all within a year. Shibata, Takayama, was the other guy that does the Kokeshi.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where
Tomoaka Honma. He used to do the headbutt where he would just fall forward and fall. He would do that off of the top rope to the outside of the ring.
Stop.
Right.
Stop.
And would miss a lot of the times. Like, it would be his thing was that he would miss sometimes. And like, that is this literally the same exact move that Chris Benoit was doing, and that screwed up his spine and his head, that gave him CTE. He had that too. He ended up getting injured. And like, when you have that kind of things, and these were people that were praised for so long. Oh yeah, this is that and the other. This is that and the other. And it's like, oh, this isn't good. Like, and the other thing too is you can see in a lot of like wrestlers, when you look at the physique that they had in the 90s and you look at the physiques that they have now.
Not everyone who's 5'8" is swole anymore.
Right. Like, I love Ishii. He is awesome, but
he's a human bowling ball.
Right. But look at his physique from back in the 90s and look at his physique now.
Right. Now he has more of like the dad.
Right.
He's like Puck from Alpha Flight.
Right. But like, you can see what happens when you can't work out certain areas of your body anymore because those body parts are injured.
Yeah.
Irreparably injured.
Right.
Like, you can't go away from, like, there is no amount of going away from the sport and then coming back to it that's going to fix these things. No. So yeah. So it's one of those. It's one of those things where it's just like, it's the more you know, the harder it is to enjoy. And especially when it's not real. And that's the thing for me with pro wrestling. That's the toughest thing to deal with, because pro wrestling has been my favorite thing since forever. Like, that was the first thing that I ever got hooked on, was pro wrestling. And it's one of the things that I can't let go of.
Right.
For personal reasons, only connection that I really have with my father for the most part, but also like, it's been there for me through childhood, teenage years, adulthood. Pro wrestling's always been one of those things. It's always there that I can go to and enjoy. But as I've gotten older, it's harder to enjoy. Like, when I watch MMA or boxing or kickboxing, Muay Thai, liftweight, whatever, there's a real thing that they're working towards. They're fighting for something real, money, pride, whatever. In pro wrestling, it's just a show.
Yeah, it's basically just a circus.
Right, it's a circus. It's not like my girlfriend. She was like, she looked like something on her Twitter timeline. Pro wrestling showed up, and of course, there's no crowd now. And she's like, this is the weirdest thing. I was like, yeah, it's the strangest thing. She's like, so it's basically a soap opera. I was like, yeah, it's a soap opera for men. And I was like, that's why it's tough for me to enjoy the way that I used to, because it's, it's they're doing all of this for our entertainment, but there's no actual goal for it. There is no actual prize that you're going to get. You're not going to win a purse.
You just get money.
You're not going to get a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this essentially, you are doing this for the admiration of an old dude.
Yeah, when you put it that way, you're doing this for the woo-has of an 80-year-old man.
Yep.
Wow, that's morbid.
Right. No, like this is, and that's one of those things. There's like we are, or rather, the performers are just puppets underneath old Seattle man, and he does not care about them.
Not the people. Well, no, he does. Well, I don't want to say he doesn't care at all, but he don't care as much as we think he doesn't care.
Yeah, no, he doesn't care about the ones that don't bring him money.
Right.
He doesn't care about the ones that he doesn't like.
Well, it's business. I've talked about this, and we've talked about this. Sports business. What have you done for me lately?
And with him, it's not even what have you done with me lately. It's this is what last week you are, and God, yeah, it's just yeah. So I want to end the show just giving my my feedback on the documentary. I openly sobbed when Chavo was recounting Eddie's death and having him die in his arms. And Eddie was probably my favorite wrestler right before I stopped watching. And just knowing everything he overcame to get back to doing something he loved, that was his family's lifeblood, essentially, that trait of being a professional wrestler. And then him dying in his nephew's arms, and then the way Chavo spun the narrative of, when I got to him, I heard like gurgling and like he tried to talk, and it's gut-wrenching to know that, hey, he still has life, and then to see it get snuffed out. Yeah.
In the matter of moments or in the matter of minutes. And I'm not gonna lie, when Eddie Guerrero passed, it crushed me.
Yeah.
I was
Eddie was one of my favorites. Eddie is one of my all-time favorites.
I was a wreck, and I didn't understand why they talked about Eddie so much, aside from, okay, him, Dean, Jericho, and Chris ran together, great. But to see the extra trauma caused on Benoit because of the death of, like you said, his wrestling soulmate, because they hated each other at first. Their families were intertwined, their wives were friends. So they were family that just wasn't related. And just knowing, and when you go back and watch the Eddie Guerrero tribute show, you see an openly sobbing Chris Benoit who can't keep it together at the beginning when Vince is doing his monologue. Yeah. And then when all the superstars are doing their backstage testimonials, you see Chris is the only one who can't hold it together. That is a man being destroyed by the thought of his best friend or brother or whatever you want to call it dying and not being able to process that. And that first part just crushed me. And then the second part, I empathized more, not even with David, not even with the wrestling aspect. I thought about Nancy. I thought about women. I thought about the fact that, they made the joke about how Kevin Sullivan booked his divorce, and what if she was still
don't see you froze
there, and then potentially, well, not potentially, she was killed by her husband. And then just think, and I've worked with youth most of my career in terms of being a youth therapist, and what his youngest son, trusting his father and being fed was an Ambien or something, or some sort of sedative, where a Xanax, and then being suffocated by your father
Mm-hmm.
while on Xanax as a child.
Yeah. And then broke Nancy's back.
Yeah.
Like
That, no.
this is one of the things I think people have, like, movies and TV have kind of like warped how people understand how
Bodies break.
how violence works.
Yeah.
Like, because you remember, we've all seen it. You know, you you get somebody will grab someone's head, just, or headlock. No, the amount of force that it takes to break someone's neck or their back is wild.
Right.
Your average person can't do it. You can't. It is the muscles of the neck. Like, unless there's like degenerative disease, it's very hard. It's really hard. Like, if you've ever grappled with someone before, you get a real sense of just how strong the human body is. Yes, we're fleshy things compared to like animals and such, but it's still very hard to do this stuff. To break someone's back like that and to know that she likely died slowly. That it was the part where with David, where I was just like
you're forgetting something here, dude.
Like there's something very bad happened. Something very, very bad happened here. And you were just completely glossing over all of it and just remembering the good parts about it. And like, the thing about trauma is you can bury it, but it will always come to the surface like a zombie. It always comes back. And when it comes back with the worst intentions.
Yeah.
And that was what I was left with at the end, where I was just like, I don't want something else tragic to happen in this family. I just don't. Because like, while I was happy that he got to see his aunt again,
yep,
I'm afraid for what could happen there. Genuinely.
Right.
Because seeing how he still worships Chris, if she slips up one day and says the wrong thing to him,
that's my concern. Yes.
I like that. That's what scared me the most of it, because you can see, like, as we said, he's not well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've worked with people that aren't well before, or lived with them, family members, friends, coworkers, it will change the way that you look at things.
Agreed.
When you know something tragic has happened before, and especially in a situation like this where it's a very public tragedy that happened. I'm hoping for the best for this, but he needs to get therapy in the worst way. And pro wrestling fans as a whole need to let go of Chris Benoit as well.
I think hero worship needs to stop. And I think part of the reason why I stopped watching a lot of organized team sports professionally is one, the concussions in the NFL, and two, the hero worship that we put on professional athletes who are not infallible, who are not impervious to acting human or making human mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, and you and I talk about sycophants all the time, mm-hmm. where you might want to jump off your faves bandwagon because they are liable to do something very humanistic and F up mm-hmm. and do something egregious. And then you're going to double down talking about, like David said, that's not him. That's not the person I know.
No,
and that's one of my biggest concerns about fandom in general.
Yeah,
is when you walk that line. And in David's case, I just hope he's able to live his life as positively as possible. Mm-hmm. I hope Nancy's family can continue to grow and heal. And the fact that Sandra even said on the show, I'm willing to forgive Chris one day,
right?
But today ain't that day.
Yeah.
But for her to even utter that
is on one hand, I understand growth and such, but I know myself, I would never be able to forgive someone.
Not at that level. Mm. I don't think I could as well.
Yeah. And no, like I would, had something happen, like had my father killed my mother.
Right.
If he didn't kill himself, I know for a fact I would have ended up killing him too. Like that's knowing the type of person that I am and how I would have dealt with it. Like that's a, like to have like those kinds of, like that's a that's a lot to be able to forgive someone that
it is.
has murdered someone that you love. Probably the person you're closest to more than anybody else in the world. That's I mean, yes, like kudos for growth, but like, yeah, I just for me, I know I couldn't, because that's a lot. And even on when she was on Talk Is Jericho years ago, she was like, because in this documentary, she also said like Chris Benoit was one of the greatest performers of all time, and he is, like, no two ways about it. He is in ring. He is one of the best of all time. But
that doesn't preclude you from what you did.
I'm still never going to give him. I would never, and I mean never, put him into the Hall of Fame ever.
No.
In any Hall of Fame. No Hall of Fame should.
No Wrestling Hall of Fame, no New Japan Hall of Fame, no ECW Hall of Fame, WCW, WWE.
You can't touch that. You can't touch him. He is radioactive. And anybody that does is you are going to invite nothing but vitriol when that happens. And if you don't get vitriol from the fans, like, you're going to have other people within the industry that are going to like, and the fans that do want to excuse what he did, is that who you really want to have as your fans?
No. That's
the thing that you want to ask. And that's one of the issues that I have with a lot of pro wrestling fandom. Same thing with MMA fandom, where you have people that cheer on these self-destructive behaviors and glorify them.
And that's why I wanted to talk about the Jon Jones thing, and that's why we've kind of transitioned into talking about him, Mike Tyson, Chris Benoit, the person formerly known as War Machine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's these are the things that in athletics and in life where we have these idols, air quotes, and role models, air quotes, where we can't just disassociate the act from the human.
Mm-hmm.
And just me personally, I WCW, I loved Chris Benoit, the wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never hear me refer to myself anything close to that ever again in terms of like my favorite wrestler. And I'll leave it at that. So before we go, I just want to ask you, is there anything you want to promote for yourself? I know you can be found, I'm just DEO on both Instagram and Twitter, but you also have your photography.
My photography is deo.shoots on Instagram as well. I need to update it. I'm very lazy about that type of stuff because it's a passion thing that I do on the side. It's not like I need to do this stuff for work now. But that's about it. Like, I've been chilling otherwise. Yeah.
Well, given the current circumstances of the world right now, I think all of our passion projects are going to be pushed a little bit more to the forefront.
Right. Yeah.
You know, because what else are we going to do? But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Again, you can find me at Damian G 347, as you can see on the scroll on the bottom there. And if you can't, I am at Twitter and on Instagram. Feel free to hit me up on anchor.fm, where the Damian G Show is played bi-weekly, as well as contributing to Big Gold Belt Podcast and Big Gold Belt Media on YouTube, where I talk sports with a more psychological twist. Thank you, and we'll talk soon.